Good afternoon. I'm Selina Riley-gurganus, and I'm in your EDL 513 class. And first, I want to thank you, Dr. Carr, for giving me the opportunity to and the liberty to take this Module 5 and take a look at some influential leaders that honestly I discovered and read more about when I was doing all the timeline activities that you assigned us. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to be able to highlight these individuals, and I hope that I will be able to give you relevant information on how I think that these 20th and 21st century leaders are still making a huge impact and influence over today's current leaders. So if I can, I would like to start by showing you my timeline. I'm going to slide my camera around really quick. And notice that I'm going from left to right. I'm going to highlight George Patton, whose reign was from 1885 and he died in 1945. Mother Teresa in 1910 through 1997. Vince Lombardi, 1913 through 1970. Colin Powell, 1937 to present. And then lastly, I'm going to give a few thoughts and ideas and inspirational quotes by Steve Jobs. His date of birth was 1955 through 2011. So as I slide things back here again, I'll move my camera around and get started. I think that as I began to study the works of these individuals, the central theme that run through the veins of all of their leadership styles and the way that they ran their organization was the following. It was their relationships with their employees or followers. It was their attitude, passion, and motivation. And lastly, each individual had clear vision. They knew where they wanted to go, and they were able to inspire their followers to go along with them to accomplish their goals. First, let me begin with George Patton. Again, he himself was an officer in the United States Army, and he's best known for his leadership as a general during World War II. He developed a reputation for sometimes being controversial and gruff outspokenness. Actually, I would consider him more of an autocratic leader, but one who always put his people first. And even in his death at his burial site, his grave is above many of his troops that he had in the World War II. You see, George Patton was a commander that led, and he had great authority, and he believed that you had to have that authority and match that authority with the responsibility that you had in whatever position you carried. He believed that leaders must protect their followers first and foremost, and that leaders never, ever gave their followers anything to do that they weren't willing to do themselves. He also believed that leaders should select people for leadership positions or delegate those positions based on those individuals' personal accomplishments and not based on his personal affections or feelings. He really stressed that each person's toolbox should influence their assignments in that organization. He didn't believe that you should never ever tell people how to do things. Instead, he believed that you should tell them what to do, and then he expected along the way, once you gave them some clear vision, that those people would surprise you with their own ingenuity or their own creativity. Now, I gathered that information on George Patton through a website called Articopia in a PDF document. 18702.pdf, and that's www.articopia.com. My second influential leader is Mother Teresa, and I had the opportunity last winter to visit India and Calcutta and actually go to the Missionary of Charity in Calcutta, where she is buried. And I think that is my first realization of what a great leader she was. And so this opportunity in this class has given me the chance to really share what I learned from her. As everybody knows, she was a Roman Catholic nun and of Indian citizenship. And she founded the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta in India in 1950. And for over 45 years, she ministered to the poor and to the sick, to the orphans and to the dying through her organization called Missionaries of Charities. And she expanded that organization first throughout India and then to other countries. As a matter of fact, before her death, she expanded that organization into 123 other countries and set up hospice facilities, homes for people with AIDS and HIV, leprosy, TB. She was a true believer in being a missionary to those who were less fortunate. And she herself lived the same life as those folks who were less fortunate because she never, ever, ever wanted to live above who she was serving. By doing so, she is nobly honored in 1979 with a Nobel Peace Prize for her humanitarian work. You see, Mother Teresa was a transformational leader. She had the ability to inspire her members to aspire and to achieve more than what they ever thought they could do and more than what they thought was possible for themselves. She was an exceptional leader with a great amount of charisma, and she inspired her members to transcend their own self-interest to achieve their vision. And she, as I said herself, I got a chance to visit her room where she slept, and for years she slept on the floor. It was a very meager room that she slept in with no frills of the society in which before she died. There were no frills at all in the way she lived her life. She was an ultimate example of transformational leadership, and she modeled that by helping others aspire and attain to high levels of performance for themselves and for the organization. Through my own personal experience, I gathered that through my readings and my visit of the missionary in Calcutta, but I also read a good bit of information from the book Improving Organizational Effectiveness Through Transformational Leadership by B.J. Avolio and B.M. Bass, a 1994 edition. Vince Lombardi, as a classroom teacher of 20 years, I started every day of my classroom with a quote and speech from Vince Lombardi. I think Vince Lombardi had the kind of passion that I aspire to have in my own career. He was an American football coach, and he's best known, of course, as being the head coach for the Green Bay Packers during the 60s, and he led him to 3 straight consecutive championships and in 5 and 7 years. Let me get those statistics right. He led the team to 3 straight league championships and 5 and 7 years, including winning the first 2 Super Bowls following the 1966 and 67 NFL seasons. Lombardi created very punishing training regimens and expected absolute dedication and effort from his players, and he got that buy-in simply because of his own consistent passion and training programs that he required of his teammates. Lombardi made some very famous quotes, and he lived by these quotes. The first I'll read, and it's quoted: "A leader must believe in teamwork through participation. He can never close the gap between himself and his group. He must walk as if he were one of the actual players, as if there was a tightrope between the consent he must win and the control he must exert." Another famous quote by Vince Lombardi is that a leader must be honest with themselves and know that as a leader, as a leader, he is still just like everybody else. Vince Lombardi believed that a leader must identify himself with the group. He must back up the group, even at the risk of maybe displeasing his own superiors. He believes that the team or the group need a sense of approval, and he believed in motivating that group and setting high expectations for them. And he did that and prevailed at that because of the way he set up his practices and his training. He was a very disciplined man. He was a man of high morals, and in return he demanded that same thing from his teammates, and was able to promote the goal of the company, if you will, his team, and was successful at doing so. And lastly, another famous quote by Vince Lombardi is that the strength of the group is in the will of the leader. The strength of the group is in the will of the leader, and the will is in the character of action. So he believed a great deal about relationships. He believed a great deal about the morale and the overall character of himself and of what he expected from his teammates. He said, when all is said and done, the leader must exercise an effective influence, and degree he accomplishes this depends on the personality of the man. And I took these quotes, and you can find them in many of his works, but the particular website that I was on when I found these leadership quotes from him was shrineagree.com, and there's a link that follows along with some of Lombardi's famous quotes, shrineagree.com. Now, Colin Powell is an American icon in leadership. He, of course, was an American statesman and retired a 4-star general in the United States Army. He was the 65th United States Secretary of State, serving under President George Bush in the years 2001 through 2005. He was the first African American to serve in that position, and has made great strides with diplomats and businesses and with the military over his career. Colin Powell's philosophy is that leadership is the art of accomplishing more than what just scientific management or organizational theory says is even possible. He believed that leaders should convey an unwavering firmness and consistency in their action. And hear this, he believed that you should align your leadership with the picture of the future that you want to paint. He believes in a vision. He believed that leaders must make themselves accessible and available to their employees or their followers, and have ongoing, consistent optimism, and never waver from that, because he didn't think there was a place in business for a negative attitude, and because he knew that attitude, and knows, I should not say this in past tense because he's still a great leader, he knows that negative attitude can be contagious. So he really, really is a believer in the positive attitude. He believed that a leader should create a climate where people's worth was determined by their own willingness, not because they were anointed or appointed to do something, but their worth was valued because of their own willingness to achieve and learn new skills and grab onto new responsibilities. And he really, really commended employees for doing that, or his followers for doing that, and that's how he gained their buy-in and continued to motivate them. I love this aspect of what Colin Powell believed in, and I pulled this from a slideshow that I found on his leadership, a presentation that he did on leadership on slideshare.net. If you look for Colin Powell's leadership presentation, you would find this. But to quote him, he said that or paraphrase him, that theories of management don't really matter. And titles mean absolutely nothing, because a lot of times people have titles because they're anointed and appointed and been handed them on a silver platter. But endeavors succeed or fail by the people that are involved, and not because of some theory or not because of some title. And I found that to be very inspiring myself in my own career. And so I would leave the timeline talking about Steve Jobs, because this is the one that's closest to me in his death, and I've looked at his graduation commencement speech and other works that he did. But you know that Steve Jobs